Hey, beautiful. Welcome to Dr. Sarah's Café. This is your weekly refill. And this week, our flavor of the week is more to learn. More to learn. Yes, if you know a little bit about astrology, you might know where I'm going with this. Saturn. Saturn is going to be retrograding. So let's dive right into our ingredients, shall we? The astro ingredients start with Mercury and Saturn trining each other. And that's happening on the 26th. I don't know what day the 26th is. It might be Tuesday or Wednesday. And what I get with this energy, what I'm feeling with it, is the student and the teacher. So Mercury being the student, Saturn being the teacher, or the inspector and the builder. So Mercury being the inspector, the person who goes in, gathers all the information, does the research, collects the data, does the survey, takes measurements. That inspector comes back and shows the builder, which is Saturn, hey, here's what we found. We found that this is the right measurement. We found that this isn't the right measurement. We found here are some gaps, here are some holes, etc., etc. And then Saturn will retrograde to take into account what that inspector has shown them. That information that Mercury is bringing to Saturn is the source, the content that Saturn is going to go back and use to revise and edit whatever we have been trying to build in our life for the past couple of years when Saturn entered Pisces. So on the 29th, Saturn officially stations retrograde. It stands perfectly still in the sky from our perspective. The planets don't literally move backwards, they just look like they're moving backwards. And when this happens, what I see is one, if we take the student teacher analogy, is that the student will reveal gaps in knowledge. Okay. And the teacher, which is Saturn, goes backwards, retrogrades to adjust their lessons, right? So Saturn gives a test and Mercury's like, oh, here's what we learned. And Saturn being the teacher is like, oh, well, there are some gaps in your learning. There's some details that you're missing. So I'm going to go back, design some new lessons, get some more information, look for more resources so that we can reteach this lesson, okay? So that we can revise your understanding. And if we take the inspector builder analogy, what I see happening here is that the builder, as I mentioned, will take the information presented to it by the inspector of Mercury with all the details and measurements and insights. And from there, they will go back and restructure what they're building. And so you see my drawing in the top right corner there is house plans, building plans. So I personally I like both because I've been a teacher, but I was also an architecture major. I love the concept of architecture and design of all sorts. But I realized I wasn't meant to be the designer. I'm just meant to appreciate it and be a huge fan of all these things. So thinking about yourselves, how does this apply to us? Well, we can start to ask ourselves questions like, what are the gaps in my knowledge? What am I not seeing? What areas of my life do I need to go back and audit, reconsider, and revise, right? So my pastry and poetry, I'm going to be reading a little bit about revisions and rewriting and restructuring. And if you know your birth chart, if you're as familiar enough with astrology to know how to look at a birth chart, you can see what house Saturn is in, and that'll tell you what area of your life you're likely to have more to learn, more to edit, more to rewrite, to revise, to restructure, okay? To redesign. Some of you could be redesigning your literal homes, the literal foundations of your life. Now, going forward, we have tarot ingredients. And so I pulled 3 cards, came out when I was shuffling the deck for this week, and they were the Ace of Wands, the Page of Pentacles, and the Queen of Wands. So these are some of the traditional depictions or drawings of them, which, as I mentioned every week, was created by a woman of color of Jamaican ancestry. And so let's look at each of these cards individually, and then I'll synthesize what they mean together as a whole. So you can almost look at the 3 of them together as like a sentence or a puzzle message that's coming together. And so with the Ace of Wands, we'll start there. It is representing a new spark or a seedling or some form of inspiration. So there's a new passion project, a new idea, a new birth, something fresh and probably exciting in your life, or something just a little like, I'm really kind of into this. I kind of want to see where this goes, right? The Page of Pentacles would be the eager intern, the practical details, and the studiousness. So that eager intern who wants to learn everything. And I think that's perfect for the Saturn retrograde, more to learn flavor that we're dealing with here. And the Queen of Wands is that confidence and that execution. Okay. So together, what these energies mean or signify is that we will have a boost to our confidence and ability to successfully execute on a new project if we educate ourselves and focus on the practical details. You with me? So I'm going to repeat that. We can have greater confidence in what we're working on or what we're doing, who we're trying to become, and we'll have more ability to execute on our ideas and plans and be successful if we do what Saturn is asking us to do, which is to make sure we're learning how to do it correctly and focusing on the practical details, the solid structure outline, the impeccable floor plans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it is that middle piece, that Page of Pentacles, really drilling down to the nuts and bolts of what our plan is and what the practical concerns are for execution, allows us to be able to execute and have confidence in going forward. Yeah. So let's look at our divinity leaves, reading the tea leaves, as they say. And it comes from the affirmation deck, and it's focusing on spiritual development. And the message for us is, I am grateful for the support of divine masters and transcended teachers who help me on my spiritual journey. Okay. So some of us might be getting extra guidance, help, support from spiritual teachers or from our higher self, our intuition, from our dreams. We might be getting some of that extra learning from a more spiritual source as well. Okay. Now for the bulletin board. I'm really excited, but also slightly nervous to be offering this because this is like the first time I've shared or done this kind of thing. But on my website, I now have a space where you can book individual readings. You can book a reading. So it'll be pre-recorded. You'll submit your name, birthday is optional, and your questions. And then I'll use intuition, tarot cards, oracle cards. If you submit your birthday, I can also use some astrology and numerology to go along with that, to give you insights and to give you support and feedback and confirmation or affirmation, right? And since we are in the beta brew phase of Dr. Sarah's Café, leading up to the grand opening, the grand launch that will be available to the masses and I will actively promote, I am doing a beta brew rate. So the typical price that I've set is $53, but for the beta brew phase this week only, I am offering these individual intuitive readings for $26. So if you want to partake in the beta brew of what Dr. Sarah's Cafe is growing into and evolving and shaping up to be with this hard Saturn work, then you can use the beta brew discount code here on the screen. I'll make it a little bigger. And that'll give you the typically $53 reading for only $26 for this week only. So ending June 30th. Okay. So I'm really excited to be more open and transparent about this kind of work and practice that I am called to do. And so I'm really excited to work with you if you decide to book something with me. All right, now for that pastry and poetry that I talked about. It is coming from this book here, Free Within Ourselves. Free Within Ourselves, Fiction Lessons for Black Authors by Jewel Parker Rhodes. One of my favorite books. It's a craft book. You know, my creative writing background, it is a craft book for fiction. I don't write a whole lot of fiction. And I've used this book in my classes as well for my creative nonfiction courses. And a lot of the lessons apply even to non-Black authors, but a lot of her examples and her discussion is about our unique legacy, but the craft is really good. The craft reflections and lessons apply to people across racial and ethnic groups. Yeah, and Jewel Parker Rhodes, this book unfortunately is out of print, I believe, so it's really hard to find. And I think I had to do PDF scans for my students. But you can see there might be some used copies available if you want to check it out, or maybe the library. Check your local libraries as well. Yeah, so let's look at what Jewel Parker Rhodes says about revision in particular. This is from chapter 11 of her book, Revisions and Letting Go. Oh, forgot to mention that our pastry is brownies. I think these are brownies. I don't remember what I typed in the search bar for this to come up, but I just love the look of them, the aesthetic of them. Okay, I wonder if I can make this smaller. I won't worry about it for now. Just do that. Okay, so Revisions and Letting Go, chapter 11. And I'm just going to read a few highlights here. In truth, the first time you think your manuscript is done, finished, fini, you probably have, depending upon the size of the manuscript, several weeks, months, possibly a year or more before your story is as good as you can make it. And so even though she's talking about writing here, for you it might be a business. For you it might be your parenting skills, like, getting your toddler to not yell or throw tantrums, or designing clothes, or getting your house restructured, or working on your marriage. Some area of your life, substitute that for writing. And of course, for others of you, it might actually be writing. So there's that. But the message here is that doing more work to make it the best it can be is to be expected. It's kind of normal, and it's definitely what Saturn calls for in every area that it touches. Then she continues, my best advice, take the time to revise. Take the time to revise. Revisions not only make your manuscript better, but make you a stronger writer. So what is it in your life that needs to be revised? Do you want to, literally in that moment, like Dr. Sarah's Café came to mind, right? That is the beta testing phase. That is what the beta brew phase is all about. It's like, let's get in there, let's tinker with some things. Let me invite people to check it out, get feedback, refine, restructure, reorganize, see what's working, see what is viable, what has legs, what could potentially really take off with the beta testing or with the cafe, what maybe needs to be tabled until later or completely scrapped altogether, right? So I've done a small round of alpha testing, and now I'm broadening the scope a little bit to do beta testing and getting more eyeballs on the space. So if you're into that, make sure you visit my website and join the bulletin board email list, because I'll be emailing people when it's time to come in and, check out the cafe. And so take the time to revise. I'm not rushing this to launch. I'm not rushing to have the grand opening at some predetermined arbitrary date. I'm kind of allowing this to be an organic process. And so for you, maybe it's not a virtual cafe that you're opening, but again, it could be so many other things for each of you. And then she continues, it would be false to say revisions always come easily. So that's one of the reasons why people don't like to revise, is because one, it's more work, and then it can be confusing on where to start. It could be a slog. While revision can be thrilling, it can also be hard nuts and bolts. I mentioned that nuts and bolts earlier. Hard nuts and bolts work. Revising takes precision, dedication, and sheer stubbornness. Below is a series of stages which can help focus your revisions, etc., etc. So I'm not going to read all of that, but I'm going to skip ahead. And she talks about the different stages of revising. And stage 4, she calls it soul searching. Okay. So stage 4, soul searching. 1, have I expressed what I passionately needed to say? Have I conveyed the emotional truth about my characters? Have I flinched from any difficult part of my manuscript? Have you flinched from a difficult conversation? Have you flinched from a difficult truth? Have you flinched from a difficult path of study, right? What are we holding back from? Have I paid tribute to my literary heritage and culture by telling a good story? For me, I think about, again, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. I always say, let me be a good steward of the freedom that my ancestors sacrificed their lives for us to have. I want to be the best possible steward of that freedom that came at such a high price. Have I written my manuscript as best I can, right? And so for me is, have I structured and built Dr. Sarah's Café to be the best that I personally can make it at this chapter in my life? For you, what is that, right? Fill in the blanks for yourself. Okay, so pause, rewind if you want to listen to those questions again and do some journaling around it. That could be very helpful. And then the last thing I'll say here is we are all each other's ancestors. You've got the tools you need to begin. The rest, you just learn as you go. Learn as you go. And so don't be afraid to progress, to step forward and move forward, even knowing that you might have a lot to learn. Oh my gosh, I have so much to learn. I shouldn't even start because I'm not already an expert. That's how a lot of times we approach things. So don't be afraid to learn as you go. And it's okay if you have more to learn. Saturn is going to show you. It's not going to leave you just hanging out there wondering what needs to be fixed. It's really going to show you like, okay, this is where you need to get to fix things. Now for your affirmation, your to-go, your takeaway. It's okay to have a beginner's mindset. It's okay that I have more to learn. And with that, my dear ones, I definitely hope to see you for your next weekly refill. And yeah, take care. Much love.